Welcome my friends, this is Maniacal Incorporated and you join me as I return to Ultimate General Civil War. A bit earlier than expected. I recently did a video on the Irish in the Battle of Fredericksburg and I said that I would do one on Gettysburg next year. But I thought to myself, while I have all this information rattling around in my head on the events leading up to Fredericksburg, why not cover the major battles leading up to that point in time? So I'm going to give a very quick overview, and then we're going to take part in the historical battle for Gaines' Mill. So there'll be some timestamps below if you want to skip this. But April 1861, Confederate forces seize Fort Sumter, starting the Civil War. Lincoln calls for 75,000 troops to defend the Union. One of the men who volunteers is Michael Corcoran, the colonel of the 69th New York State Militia. He and his men are sent to Washington to bolster the defense of the capital, and 3 months later they take part in the First Battle of Bull Run, which is a Union defeat. Corcoran is captured, and back in New York, one of the men who had served under him, Thomas Francis Maher, exiled for his role in the 1848 rebellion, exiled from Ireland to Van Diemen's Land, where he escaped in the early 1850s. Thomas Francis Maher sets about recruiting an Irish Brigade to serve in the American Civil War, to keep the Irish together so that the Irish can serve together and earn prestige and glory for the name of Ireland, and to show their loyalty to the United States. So Maher is promoted to Brigadier General, and alongside the 69th New York, the 63rd and the 88th New York regiments are established, and these form the backbone of the Irish Brigade. Later on, the 28th Massachusetts and the 116th Pennsylvania will be added. In March of 1862, they depart from New York to take part in the Peninsula Campaign. Union forces land on the peninsula, leading to Richmond, and they progress towards the Confederate capital of Richmond. In a number of battles, there's the siege of Yorktown. There's the Battle of Williamsburg, where Martin Conboy from Roscommon and Thomas Fallon from Galway, both members of the 37th New York, they earn the Medal of Honor. And they continue pushing on to the outskirts of Richmond, where on the 31st of May 1862, their march will be brought to a halt by the Battle of Fair Oaks. There's about a 1 month lull, and then we're looking at the 7 days campaign in towards the end of June, start of July. The 7 days battles, a series of battles as the Confederates try to push the Union forces away from Richmond, and there's a number of, it's pretty much 7 straight days of battles. And if we look over here in the historical battles, I'm going to skip the first Battle of Bull Run, and of the 7 days battles, the two that we have are the Battle of Gaines' Mill and Malvern Hill, which is the next one that I'm going to do. And I'm going to look at Antietam as well, and possibly Chancellorsville, which occurs before Gettysburg. So we will start into the Battle of Gaines' Mill. So June 27, 1862, General McClellan thought his amphibious landings during the Peninsula Campaign would force the Confederates on the defensive rather than digging in. General Lee marshaled the army of Northern Virginia and ordered an immediate concentrated assault upon the right flank of the Union Army. Overwhelmed by the tactical audacity of the Confederates, Federal troops withdrew and prepare a hasty defense near Gaines' Mill to stop the rebel advance. And we're going to see how that plays out, and we're going to see some of the Irish troops involved. I'm going to play this time as the Union, so I was a Copperhead the last time round, a Northern sympathizer of the Southern cause. I'm now playing as a galvanized Yankee. These are predominantly Confederate prisoners of war who switch to the Union side. So I'm going to play as the Union, and I'm just going to go for the medium difficulty. So this is basically a Confederate push on some Union forces isolated on the northern side of the Chickahominy River, which we can just about see here, and there is Gaines' Mill. And we can see that we are vastly outnumbered, so it's going to be a fairly tough one. We don't actually have a lot of Irish forces to pay attention to here, we have Farnsworth, under whose lead is William Gamble from Fermanagh. And we also have Griffin. Griffin is the other one that we are predominantly watching out for today. There he is. And in the Confederate army, who we're going to pay attention to when they come onto the field, we should see them at some stage, is Seymour, Isaac Seymour, who is leading what is effectively the Louisiana Brigade. So I don't see his name there. There's Pickett, there's Longstreet, some famous names. I'm not too sure, but he's around here. Isaac Seymour, there we are. So we might see him popping onto the field at some stage, but we are vastly outnumbered, heavily outnumbered. We don't have a huge amount of Irish in this actual battle. So we're being told that our forces are executing a tactical withdrawal to prepare for Lee's attack on the right flank. Now what's going to happen in the first stage of the battle is we're basically going to bring our forces from here and pull them back to these defensive positions. And we're going to hold these defensive positions until the end of the battle. Historically, towards the end, the Irish Brigade came in, and depending on which accounts you read, they either came in too late to be of any use in the battle, or they came in just in time to save the Union position from absolute collapse, and they assisted in a rearguard action. So basically they defended the Union position as it retreated south across the bridge. So we're going to take up defensive positions here. This is where we're starting, and we're going to have Confederates coming in this line. Over here is Gaines Mill itself. So I'll put up some battle maps now in a moment to just show where the positions are. And we're going to have a second and a third phase where we're going to have forces sweeping down from this direction as well. I've played this battle already, and it is absolute hell. So they're telling us to get this defensive position ready, and I think in the second or third phase we're going to have a very small amount of reinforcements coming in. So General, the rebels are pursuing us along this road past Gaines Mill. And we must buy time for the army to establish a defensive line. It is advised to deploy skirmishers and delay the enemy. So I'll pause there very quickly. And like I said, I'll bring up a map just to show you, again, the great work, the absolutely awesome work that these guys have done. The dev team behind Ultimate General Civil War. I was going to call it Gods and Generals, but you can see the amount of work that they've put in using satellite imagery and historical maps to get the exact battlefield layout. So there is Gaines Mill itself. And I'll address them more towards the end of the battle. We'll take a very quick look at Griffin. So this is part of the 5th Corps, 1st Division. It is the 2nd Brigade under Brigadier General Charles Griffin. He is going to be promoted to oversee the 5th Corps. He's going to be in command of that at Fredericksburg, and to replace him will be Jacob Switzer, who you might remember from the Battle of Fredericksburg. This is the brigade that includes the 9th Massachusetts, which is... it was established by and is currently under the command of Colonel Thomas Cass from County Louth. He's going to be killed in the Battle of Malvern Hill. He's going to be mortally wounded and will die from his wounds in the Battle of Malvern Hill in just a couple of days' time. And we also have in here the Deasy brothers, Cornelius and Timothy Deasy. Timothy will take part in the 1867 rebellion. He'll be sent to Ireland, and on its failure he will escape to England, where he'll be captured. And as he's being escorted through Manchester, the prison escape that leads to his escape will result in the executions of 3 Fenians, which will become known as the Manchester Martyrs. So DC, like I said, is in there somewhere, and we're gonna deal with how the 9th Massachusetts does on the field today. But that's predominantly the major Irish involvement. Until we get to the end of the day with the Irish Brigade coming in, we won't actually see them here today. So what I'm going to do is I am going to play out this battle. I'm going to bring these forces back into position here, and I'm going to record a bit on the lead up to Malvern Hill, dealing with the Battle of Fair Oaks, and dealing with some of the individuals that are in the staff of George McClellan's army. So this is taken from a list on the Wikipedia page, the Union Order of Battle, and it shows the aides-de-camp and some of the other members of staff of McClellan's unit, and there are some very interesting figures in there. We'll start with the Headquarters Bodyguard, which is made up of Company A and Company E of the 4th US Cavalry, and Company E is commanded by Lieutenant William O'Connell from Ireland. We also have about 3 companies of the United States Engineers under the command of Captain James Dunn. His great-grandfather was a member of the Continental Congress and was mayor of New York, and his father, so Captain James Dunn's great-great-grandfather, was born in Galway. There's also the 15th New York Engineers under the command of Colonel John McLeod Murphy, a very Irish-sounding name, but I've no proof or I haven't seen anything about him being Irish. However, in the 15th New York Engineers there are a lot of Irishmen. Damian Shiels has a fantastic article over on his blog about this, including Felix Larkin, who is captain of one of the companies. Now, the main thing of interest here is the personal staff, the aides-de-camp. There are some fascinating figures in here, and if you were ever given a time machine and told that you could sit in on one dinner, this would be the one I think that I would pick to have a dinner with this group. We have Colonel John Jacob Astor III, the father of William Waldorf Astor, 1st Viscount Astor. We have Lieutenant Colonel Paul von Radowitz, the son of the former Prussian foreign minister in the 1850s. And we have a young Captain George Custer, who will win eternal fame for himself for all the wrong reasons at the Battle of Little Bighorn. So we're going to go off on a bit of a tangent here. At the Battle of Little Bighorn, one of the men who will die alongside him is Miles Keogh from Carlow. Keogh fought in the Papal Army in defence of the Papal States during the Expedition of the Thousand, and now a number of individuals are travelling from the United States looking for trained European officers, and one of them is Archbishop John Hughes, the Archbishop of New York, born in Tyrone, and he is looking for trained Irishmen amongst the ranks of the Papal Army. So he entices Miles Keogh to come to the United States to serve in the American Civil War. Initially he serves under the command of James Shiels, Brigadier General James Shiels, also from Tyrone, but he is going to be switched later on to the staff of George McClellan, and he will serve under McClellan at the Battle of Antietam, so we might deal more with his actions at Little Bighorn later on. I will quickly address his grandnephew, Michael Keogh, an absolutely fascinating figure, actually served in the American Army, apparently, for a period of time, but he is part of the British Army before the outbreak of the First World War. He's captured in one of the earliest engagements, and while in a German POW camp, Michael Keogh and a number of other Irishmen are visited by Roger Casement, and they are recruited into Casement's Irish Brigade. These are a group of Irish POWs who are trained by the German army in preparation for an invasion of Ireland to back up the 1916 Rising. This, of course, doesn't happen. Casement refuses to bring them in with him when he learns that they're not going to get a huge amount of support from the Germans, and returns to Ireland to try and call off the Rising, and is executed after his capture. Keogh is going to continue to serve with the German army, and serves with the Stahlhelm in the aftermath of the First World War, and claims that he saves the life of a young Austrian corporal named Adolf Hitler, who was in the process of getting the living daylights beaten out of him for a speech that he made. And if you Google the Irishman who saved Hitler, you will find references to Michael Keogh. There was a biography of him released a couple of years ago that apparently a priest had stolen at some stage. The stories are absolutely mad. I'll try and find a good picture of his medals. He has the Mons Star, I think he has the 1916 Service Medal and the War of Independence Service Medal, and then a number of German decorations. It is the most insane list of medals that I've ever seen in my life, but that is a tangent to a tangent. The grandnephew of Miles Keogh, who dies alongside George Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn, but Keogh will take part in the Battle of Antietam, and Custer is on the personal staff of George McClellan. Also on the personal staff, you might have thought it couldn't get more insane than it already is, we have the captains, brothers Robert and Louis-Philippe d'Orléans. Their grandfather was King of France until his abdication during the 1848 revolution. Their father had died young, so Louis-Philippe would have been next in line for the throne. So we have, effectively, the pretender to the French throne serving. And we also have, in the midst of all this, we have the father of English nobility, we have Prussian nobility, we have French nobility. In the midst of all this, we have Martin T. McMahon from Canada, born in Quebec to migrants from Waterford. He's just a couple of days away from being awarded, well, he's a couple of days away from the actions for which he will be awarded the Medal of Honor at the Battle of White Oak Swamp in about 3 days' time, during the 7 days battles. And he has 2 older brothers. Now, they don't seem to take any role in the Civil War until Michael Corcoran is released from a Confederate prison after about 13 months. So he's captured at the First Battle of Bull Run. He is offered the opportunity of an early release if he gives a commitment that he won't play any further part in the Civil War. He refuses to do so. So he spends a total of 13 months in prison, and there are many individuals who are actually waiting for him to be released. And when he's released, in late 63, John and James McMahon joined the 164th New York Regiment, which is part of Corcoran's Legion. John, the eldest brother, will command the 164th until he dies of disease in March of 63, and then James will take over until he's killed in action at the Battle of Cold Harbor, which is in pretty much the region that we are in now. So Cold Harbor is just on the outskirts of Richmond, so the Union forces are going to be driven back from here, and in 2 years' time they're going to return in this direction again. And indeed, that actually might give you an idea as to why Thomas Francis Maher finds it so difficult to recruit troops in early 1863 after the Battle of Fredericksburg for the Irish Brigade. Those who are still enthusiastic about the war are pretty much hanging around and supportive of Corcoran. So they've joined Corcoran's Legion. And now Maher is returning as the war is becoming unpopular, as the Irish Brigade has suffered massive casualties at Fredericksburg. He's coming looking for troops in an area that's been pretty much cleaned out for Corcoran's Legion. And of course the McMahon surname, there are a couple of different origins, so there's a couple of different kind of, we won't call them branches, but unconnected McMahon groups in Ireland, but one of the most prominent would be one of the descendants of Brian Boru. So the senior descendants of Brian Boru would call themselves the Ivrian, the O'Brien, and then one of the secondary groups took the name from a more recent ancestor, Mahone, and called themselves the Mach Mahona, which becomes McMahon. And Mahone, or Mahon, as we saw, one of the Confederate commanders who is around the area at this time. I think he might be at Malvern Hill. William Mahone, or William Mahon, who we saw at Fredericksburg, commanding Confederate forces. But I addressed the McMahon surname in a video that I did on Brian Boru and his descendants. But now we are going to address one of the most important, one of the most dramatic events of the American Civil War. Is it the attack on the Sunken Road? No. Or the charge on Marie's Height? No. It is the Chickahominy steeplechase. On the 31st of May, 1862, Thomas Francis Maher organised a steeplechase, a horse race, for the Irish Brigade. Entry was $3. It was open to any officer who owned a horse. They could either ride the horse in the race, or any other officer could ride the horse. They had to wear jockey dress. They had to dress as jockeys. Getting the uniform was quite difficult. One of them showed up in a pair of trousers made from red curtains that were taken from a nearby house. This is the account given by David Power Cunningham in his History of the Irish Brigade, and I'll link to that below. There's an archived copy that you can find online, and it's a fantastic read because he travelled with the brigade and he is accounting his personal experiences. I'm sure they're dramatised in certain places. Now, why would you want to try and get a pair of trousers to take part in this race, and why would you want to try and get $3 together to take part? Because of the prize. First prize in this steeplechase was a tiger skin, taken from a tiger, killed by Thomas Francis Maher in South or Central America. It changes from page to page on Cunningham's account of the race. There was supposed to be 3 heats. I'm not too sure if they all got ran off, but Cunningham gives most of the attention to one particular horse, Katie Darling. He actually names all the horses. Fog of Alloch is in there. Little George is in there. I wonder if that's a reference to George B. McClellan. I wonder if he ever met that horse. But Katie Darling is the one that gets most of the attention, owned by Lieutenant James Turner from County Louth. He will be killed at the Battle of Wilderness. And the horse was ridden by Major James Kavanagh from Tipperary, who was wounded and mustered out of the army after the Battle of Fredericksburg. So Katie Darling wins the first race. Cunningham says that there's then a second race, and there's then a mule race where the drummers have to race the mules, much to the hilarity of everyone involved. There's then a play. There's a theatre play is put on, but it is abandoned when a call to arms goes out, because this is the start of the Battle of Fair Oaks, which lasts from the 31st of May to the 1st of June 1862. So the steeplechase is interrupted by the battle. And the Irish Brigade suffers about 100 casualties during the Battle of Fair Oaks. They receive tremendous credit for holding the Union position, and the battle itself proves largely to be inconclusive, but one of the things that it does lead to is the wounding of Joseph Johnson on the Confederate side, and he is replaced with Robert E. Lee as commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. Now, like I said, the Battle of Fair Oaks proves to be inconclusive. Both sides claim victory, but the reality is that McClellan's advance on Richmond grounds to a halt, and Robert E. Lee is able to withdraw his forces and begin building the defences of Richmond. But for about a month, everything grounds to a halt. In that period of time, the Irish Brigade is reinforced by the 29th Massachusetts. So at the moment it just consists of the 3 New York regiments, the 63rd, the 69th and the 88th. They are expecting an Irish regiment, and apparently the 29th was supposed to be an Irish regiment. However, its men were taken and put into the ranks of the 28th Massachusetts, and when the 29th shows up, it's predominantly an American regiment. Some of its members are descendants of those who had been on board the Mayflower, so they're going to have a strange relationship with the Irish Brigade going forward. They're not always the happiest to be taking orders from an Irish commander, but Maher in particular will have nothing but good things to say about the 29th in their service with the Irish Brigade. They're, of course, the only ever non-Irish regiment to serve in the brigade. So following Fair Oaks, McClellan digs in where he is. Lee falls back on Richmond and begins building the defences, and there's about a month of inactivity before the Confederate forces attack the Union over a period of 7 days in what becomes known as the 7 Days Battles, which will eventually end with Malvern Hill on July 1st, so basically from the 25th of June to the 1st of July. And Malvern Hill will be a victory for the Union. However, it will put them in a position, an undefensible position, and they will effectively have to withdraw, bringing to an end the Peninsula Campaign and the 7 Days Battles. So we've just gotten the notification there in the top left that Ewell's division is moving to attack, and we saw Seymour advancing. That is Isaac Seymour, and he's commanding the Louisiana Tigers, which is a brigade of Louisiana regiments, and that includes the 6th Louisiana Tigers. Now, they're often referred to as the Irish Brigade, the Confederate Irish Brigade. They're one of a number of units referred to as the Confederate Irish Brigade. They do have a number of very heavily Irish companies. The regiment as a whole, at its peak of 980 men, it has 468 of whom are of Irish birth. So I think just under half the regiment is Irish. And again, as I covered in Fredericksburg, about 20,000 Irish serve on the Confederate side, and 140 to 200,000 on the Union side. So there we go. Isaac Seymour, he's actually going to be killed in the Battle of Gaines Mill. So this battle here today will result in Isaac Seymour being killed. And the 6th Louisiana end up facing the Irish Brigade on a few occasions, and I believe they're going to be manning the walls at the sunken road at Antietam. And we also have he's being pushed back a bit. He's keeping an eye on what's going on, but it's not looking good. We have Farnsworth, and in there, I believe today he's commanding the 8th Illinois, and that includes William Gamble from Fermanagh and his son George. After the 7 Days battles have ended, William Gamble is actually going to be injured, and he's going to be out of commission for a while. I don't believe he sees action at the Battle of Fredericksburg. So I mentioned him in the Battle of Fredericksburg, but he's back with the unit, but he doesn't actually see action at Fredericksburg. So pull him back. So he's just throwing a few shots at Greg's men to try and upset them. And like I said, at the wall we have Griffin. At the wall we have Griffin, which includes the 9th Massachusetts. And you can see the concentration of fire that's coming in. It's just going to get worse. We got some reinforcements, but they are the first and only reinforcements that we're going to get. Whereas the Confederate forces keep massing, keep massing, keep massing. So Griffin, I'm not too sure where I've actually deposited him, but that includes the 9th Massachusetts under the command of Colonel Thomas Cass from Louth, and they very quickly burn through the 60 rounds of ammunition that they've been given, and they're going to be talking about how they will be picking rounds up from the dead men beside them to fire. So our objectives are basically to hold these positions if we can. It's basically an orderly retreat back across a bridge located somewhere in this direction. Now here is one of our issues. It's all well and good to try and have men backing up the men at the wall. The problem is the forces coming in from the north. So they're going to try and cut off our center, and this is where it's one of the objectives that we need to hold, but it's also where I have the cannons. So we could try to bring the cannons forward a bit. They're getting some bit done. We're hearing a charge coming in some direction. That could be from the... that's it exactly. So that's not great. That's not great. Especially that they actually got caught in a charge from units. That's not brilliant. They're coming down in an interesting direction, so they are going to pretty much try and surround us on this hill. Farnsworth suffered heavy losses. That is not great. We must hold till the end of the day. Easier said than done. So some forces are coming up. French and Maher with the Irish Brigade. But like I said, they're going to arrive too late to have a material impact on the battle, and they're not actually even going to show up here. So in their absence, we will continue on. So we're going to see the main Confederate push now. So they receive more reinforcements. We must hold till the end of the day. And we have a pretty lengthy time in which we have to hold for. It doesn't seem like it, but it is. Oh, we're in a bit of trouble over here. Well, that's fantastic. Anderson has been distracted by our cavalry. Garland has been distracted by our artillery. Farnsworth has actually been wounded. Our artillery is being pushed back, so that is not great. And we have Buttonfield's forces coming in to try to save the artillery. We can bring Farnsworth up what's left to try and deal some damage. We're seeing some units being driven back here. We're going to see a lot of units being driven back. So there is Seymour charging. And we've actually lost command of the earthworks, which is not good. Going to try and send some forces in. We'll have to pull these guys back to defend the artillery. Our artillery is having a very bad day. But we are managing to at least hold these guys here. Branch is coming in. Bartlett is still holding, and we're getting a charge here in this direction. So here is Griffin. This flank isn't doing the worst, but we do need to actually keep some forces there. And our artillery is being pushed, and pushed badly. Farnsworth is having a terrible day. I've done an absolutely atrocious job with Farnsworth. We have a fantastic scenario here where our artillery is firing on Garland and we're below the hill firing on Garland. We have 2 units here concentrating on Newton, which isn't great. So Longstreet's division is advancing, so you can see there's even more coming in. And we're now getting flanked by Anderson's forces that were driven off in a strange direction. Oh, we are not having a good day. We are not having a good day at all. So Farnsworth's in a bad position, in against some artillery. We might be able to clear some of them out, which would be fantastic. That's usually what we should be using the cavalry for. But it doesn't always work. So Newton is exhausted, unfortunately. Taylor's being driven back. We've managed to take and hold everything again. How is Farnsworth doing? Okay, that charge did not go so well. It's a head-on charge into artillery, never great, and the charge has actually been broken. Jones's men are still down here. That's the issue. So we're dealing well with the artillery, but not so much with the actual units. We have a lot of people looking for supplies. I don't believe I have any. Do we have another supply train around here somewhere? We do. We'll try and bring those guys up. Warren's forces are falling back. And Newton's forces are just about holding. Butterfield's forces are not. Are they sending some people up to deal with Farnsworth? I think so. So we can see a tremendous amount of Confederate charges on our positions. One of them has broken through here in this region. So we have a charge coming in against Griffin. Griffin's troops, the 9th Massachusetts, resisted 3 charges. So this is them here. They lost 231 men. And David Power Cunningham, in his account of the Irish Brigade, he says that the 3rd Massachusetts were actually sent in on a charge against Stonewall Jackson's troops. And as Jackson saw the green banner coming in, he thought it was the Irish Brigade. And he ordered up his reserves, and he ordered them to sweep away that damned brigade, as he called them. The 9th Massachusetts went in. They weren't able to break through the Confederate lines. They were pushed back to a defensive position just as the Irish Brigade was coming up. And Cass and Maher had a very brief conversation with each other. Maher sees Thomas Cass covered in blood and dirt, and asks, "Is that Colonel Cass?" And Cass says, "Is that the Irish Brigade? We are saved." Now, I don't think we're going to be having, unless the Irish Brigade shows up all of a sudden, I don't think we're going to be having anyone saving us today. This is not looking good. So the Confederates have they've taken 2 of the positions. There you go. Without the Irish Brigade, it is turning into a rout. I think the artillery placement was terrible, and I just got into a lot of trouble over here. And Farnsworth, I didn't use Farnsworth. I didn't utilize him as well as I did previously. Just making excuses for when President Lincoln asks me what went wrong. Making my excuses. We have retaken and lost. Oh no, we've taken one place and lost a different one. So Farnsworth, I'm trying to get him to pull back. So Pickett's charge has been successful this time round. They're bringing in heavy forces on us. Will we be able to charge them in that situation? Totally lost this side of the battlefield, and this is where it was lost, because I had to divert far too many forces to try and hold on to this area. Now the Irish Brigade is going to be coming up in this region, and to hold the defensive position and allow for a much more orderly withdrawal than we are seeing here. And I believe it's the 69th Pennsylvania. I'll have to verify that. Oh, it's the 37th New York. And they're sent in to... So the bridges are destroyed once the Union cross over. And Edwin Sumter needs one of them rebuilt to bring some artillery across. And I think it's the 37th. I'll verify that. I think it's the 37th New York is put fixing the bridge. And Sumter comes up in a hurry. And the first person he meets is a Captain O'Shea from County Kerry. And he says, "Can we get artillery across the bridge?" To which O'Shea says, "Yes, if it's flying artillery." David Power Cunningham recounted that in his history of the Irish Brigade, and how he had joked with Captain O'Shea as he was departing from the brigade that he would write O'Shea's obituary, and indeed he did. O'Shea would be killed at the Battle of Wilderness. Oh, we're hearing a charge coming in some direction. Well, we held on to McGee Hill, and do you know what? That's something to be happy about. So Anderson getting into this awkward position over here on this side was absolute devilment. I think we drove them back in that direction, and they've caused utter havoc to us. So a lot of our forces have fallen back, and there is Griffin. They've fallen back, and I haven't gotten them forward to the defences again. But you can see just how much we are overwhelmed, and it is a defeat. It is a defeat for the Union forces. And I just checked to verify there that Captain O'Shea from County Kerry was with the 42nd New York, the Tammany Regiment. And included in that as well is Michael Madden from Ireland, born in Ireland, and he has already carried out the actions for which he will receive the Medal of Honor at Mason's Island in September of 1861. And that was just a few days after his 20th birthday, or about a few weeks. So he carried out those actions in late September of 1861, and his 20th birthday was the start of September 1861. So we've a number of Medal of Honor winners on the field today, and like I said, I think it's the 37th. New York has a number of them. Indeed, 3 have been won. Martin Conboy from Roscommon at the Battle of Williamsburg, Thomas Fallon at the Battle of Williamsburg, and James O'Brien at the Battle of Fair Oaks on May 31st. And Martin McMahon will also be awarded the Medal of Honor in just a couple of days' time at the Battle of White Oak Swamp, which is not one of the missions that's here on the historical maps. The next one that I'm going to deal with is the Battle of Malvern Hill on July 1st, where, of course, Thomas Cass will receive mortal wounds that will result in his death. Cass, who was a tremendous leading figure with the 9th Massachusetts, and his loss is greatly mourned by them and all in the Irish Brigade, who had tremendous respect for him. So, we did not manage an orderly retreat today. The Irish Brigade did not come in time to stabilise our withdrawal, and instead it collapsed into sheer and utter panic and anarchy. The first time I played this, I was lucky in a couple of occasions. The Confederate forces didn't attack fast enough, and as my men were driven back from the wall, I was able to send somebody else forward to rehold it, or to retake it. But the action there on this side, I messed up utterly. I did very bad in that situation, and it has led to our defeat. I have a feeling, is this what we've lost? I'm not actually too sure, but here are all the various different weapons. Well, there you go. Thank you very much for joining me on this look at the Irish involvement in the Battle of Gaines Mill. We didn't see the Irish Brigade, but we saw the 9th Massachusetts, and we saw the 8th Illinois with William Gamble. But what I mostly wanted to cover was the absolutely fascinating cast of characters on the personal staff attached to the headquarters. So there we go. Thank you all very much for joining me on this episode. Leave a like if you haven't done so already to summon the algorithm. If you have any stories about Irish people who were involved in the Battle of Gaines Mill that I didn't get to cover, they would have been distributed throughout the ranks. They would have been distributed throughout the other companies and regiments. If you have any stories or any tales that I didn't get to cover today, please do drop them below in the comments section, and I will see you for the Battle of Malvern Hill.